I'm not going to lie to you, Marcius. You're in a tough situation. And whether I'm right or whether I'm wrong, I know that you're steadfast in your beliefs and that you're going to find a place in this world, even though Junius Brutus and Sicinius Volutus make you feel like you'll never belong. You're an incredible warrior, but your nature's not suited to be a member of the council. It's like trying to put a square peg in a round hole. Look, you asked for my help. I'm a retired coach. What else can I be but what I am? If you leave Rome, I know you're going to want to live and not merely survive. But right now, you're so filled with contempt and disgust for the way the Roman citizens have treated you that you won't give up on that dream of life and vengeance that keeps you alive. So go to Actium if you seek that faraway prize and see if your arch rival, Tullus Aufidius, will join forces with you and together you can pursue a world of success. I believe that you will heed the call and won't settle down or settle for less because you believe that what those Roman ingrates did to you was wrong. And as long as there is a chance that you could have it all, your arrogant pride will keep driving you towards revenge. I know how you are. You'll go it alone without your mother Volumina, your wife Virgilia, and your son Marcius if that's how it must be. You refuse to go along with the council's hypocritical policies because thou canst be right for someone else if you're not right for thee. There's just no stopping you, Coriolanus. You're the kind of man who's going to do what you want to do, daring to try to do it or die, all the while saying to yourself, I gotta be me. In the classic 1979 Broadway musical Evita, there is a song in which Juan Perón says to his wife, "The people belong to no one. They are fickle, can be manipulated." Well, what was true in Argentina in the 1940s was just as true for Coriolanus in ancient Rome in the 5th century BC. So let's take a look at the plot. As the play begins, Rome has expelled the Tarquin kings. However, there are riots in progress because stores of corn are being withheld from ordinary citizens. The rioters are particularly angry at Caius Marcius, whom they blame for the loss of their corn, even though they recognize him as a brilliant Roman military leader. When the rioters encounter Roman general Menenius Agrippa and Caius Marcius, Menenius tries to calm the rioters down, but Marcius openly demonstrates his contempt for them and says that the citizens are not worthy of the corn because of their lack of military service. Meanwhile, two troublesome Roman tribunes, Junius Brutus and Sicinius Volutus, privately denounce Marcius. But after news arrives that the Volscian army is in the field, Marcius leaves Rome to fight. Volsci commander Tullus Aufidius has fought Marcius on several occasions and regards him as a worthy but sworn enemy. Cominius is the commander of the Roman army, and Caius Marcius serves as his deputy. While Cominius leads his soldiers to face Aufidius's army, Marcius leads a rally against the Volscian city of Corioli. At first, the siege of Corioli is unsuccessful. However, Marcius is able to force open the city gates, and the Romans conquer the city. Although he is exhausted from the battle, Marcius marches quickly and joins Cominius to fight the remaining Volscian forces. Marcius and Aufidius meet in single combat and fight until Aufidius's own soldiers drag him away from the battle. In recognition for his great courage, Cominius gives Caius Marcius the official nickname of Coriolanus. When they return to Rome, Coriolanus's mother Volumina encourages him to run for consul. And although Coriolanus is reluctant to do this because he's a warrior and not a politician, he eventually gives in to his mother's wishes. He easily wins over the support of the Roman Senate, and it looks as if he has initially won over the citizens as well. But Junius Brutus and Sicinius plot to defeat Coriolanus by instigating another riot opposing Coriolanus's bid for consul. After learning of the opposition, Coriolanus flies into a rage and rails against them. Junius Brutus and Sicinius condemn Coriolanus as a traitor for his words and succeed in having him banished from Rome. But Coriolanus replies that it is he who banishes Rome from his presence. Now, having been exiled from Rome, Coriolanus goes to the Volscian capital of Antium and asks Sulpicius's help to help him wreak revenge on Rome for having banished him. Moved by his plight and honored to fight alongside this great general and former worthy adversary, Aufidius and his superiors embrace Coriolanus and allow him to lead the assault on Rome. The Romans panic and desperately try to persuade Coriolanus to end his crusade for vengeance, but both Cominius and Menenius fail to influence him. Desperate, the Romans finally send Volumina to meet her son, along with Coriolanus's wife Virgilia, their son Marcius, and a chaste woman named Valeria. After imploring her son in every conceivable way, Volumina finally succeeds in persuading her son not to destroy Rome and reconciles the Volsces with Rome, thus creating a peace. However, after Coriolanus finalizes the peace treaty between the two warring factions, he returns to Antium, where Aufidius and his conspirators kill Coriolanus for his betrayal. When we return, we'll look at some of the remarkable characters in Coriolanus. All right, let's take a look at some of these characters, and we'll start off with the chief protagonist, Caius Marcius. He is the most effective and powerful warrior in all of Shakespeare's plays. He single-handedly goes into battle against the city of Corioli and captures it, thus earning him the name Caius Marcius Coriolanus. And while it's true that he's sometimes arrogant and proud, it's just as true that periodically he is beyond humble. He refuses to take more than his share of the spoils from the city and is too embarrassed to hear the consul brag about his accomplishments. As with most of Shakespeare's most memorable characters, he is very complicated, especially because he doesn't have many long self-examining soliloquies in the play. Next, we have his mentor and father figure, Menenius Agrippa. He is a patrician of Rome and also on the consul. He has the great distinction to be respected by the people, the consul, and Coriolanus. In fact, he's one of only a few people that Coriolanus ever listens to, but even that comes to an end after Coriolanus is banished and threatens to sack Rome. Next up is Cominius. He is the general under whom Coriolanus serves, and like Menenius, Coriolanus respects him and listens to him again until he reaches the point of no return. Then we have the two chief antagonists in the play, Sicinius Volutus and Junius Brutus. These two troublemakers really contribute nothing, but are very protective of their own consul positions. They stir the pot against Coriolanus to get all the Roman citizens to turn against him and banish him. Their plotting and deviousness are primarily what makes this play so timeless when compared to political behavior in any subsequent period in history. Tullus Aufidius is the general of the Volscian army, and also Coriolanus's direct military rival. The two of them have a great respect for each other, even though each one longs to vanquish the other. And finally, we'll look at the three V ladies in the play. First, we have Valeria, the chaste lady of Rome and family friend. Next is Virgilia, Coriolanus's wife, whom he greets when he comes back from war as my gracious silence. That is a direct contrast of descriptions between her and Volumina, who probably has more lines in the play than her son Coriolanus. There has never been a prouder mother of a warrior. Just listen to what she has to say about her son when Virgilia asks her how she would feel if Marcius had been killed in the war. Then his good report should have been my son. I therein would have found issue. Hear me profess sincerely. Had I a dozen sons, each in my love alike, and none less dear than thine and my good Marcius, I had rather had 11 die nobly for their country than one voluptuously surfeit out of action. And while Volumina shows an extreme zeal of pride for her son, She also has the tact and diplomacy to know when to yield to avoid coming across as arrogant. When we get back, we'll look at some of the plot devices and memorable scenes from Coriolanus. Once again, we see that Shakespeare is using banishment in this play, but it's more than that. It's banishment that leads to an angry, returning force of nature. After Coriolanus is banished from Rome, he goes directly to its arch-rival Tullus Aufidius and convinces him to join forces and attack his former homeland. It's only the pleading of his mother, wife, and son that prevent him from destroying the city. We'll see this again in Timon of Athens, after Alcibiades is banished, and then the citizens and leadership beg him not to destroy their city. We'll also see this in Titus Andronicus, after their son Marcius is banished from Rome and seeks out his former enemies, in this case the Goths, and returns to decimate his former homeland. Does this sound familiar or what? And then, of course, we have Henry Bolingbroke in Richard II, who is banished from England and then returns to usurp the throne. We also have political deviousness amongst opposing factions. In Coriolanus, there is Jutius Brunus and Sicinius Volutus, who have really nothing better to do than to incite rebellion against Coriolanus so that their own power will not be diminished. We also see this in Henry VI, Part 2, when Margaret, her paramour, the Duke of Suffolk, and Cardinal Beaufort, the Bishop of Winchester, all plot against Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, to eliminate him as a political threat and influencer of Henry VI. So too do Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, as directed by Claudius, conspire to do away with Prince Hamlet. In King Lear, we have the triumvirate of Regan, Goneril, and Edmund, who engage in subterfuge against Edmund's brother Edgar and Father Gloucester. And of course, we have Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, who plot to and assassinate King Duncan as he sleeps in their own castle. And we'll cover one more popular visual device, which is having heroic warriors battle against one another. Coriolanus goes up against his arch-rival Tullus Aufidius, general of the Volsces. In Henry IV, Part 1, we have Henry Monmouth, Hal, fighting mana a mana against Henry Percy, Hotspur. In Henry VI, Part 3, we see former allies, now adversaries, Edward Plantagenet and Warwick battle it out to the death. And in Macbeth, we have Macbeth and Macduff fight to the death in the final scene of the play, with Macduff emerging victoriously. And in Richard III, Richard finally meets his match when he is defeated by Richmond at the Battle of Bosworth Field. As far as memorable scenes go, there are several. One almost seems to be a throwaway scene, and that's Act 1, Scene 10, wherein Coriolanus tells Cominius and Titus Lartius about a poor man who treated him kindly and whom Coriolanus wishes to set free. Cominius agrees, but Coriolanus cannot remember the man's name and quickly asks if they have any wine. This shows well-intended appreciation for others. However, he fails to demonstrate his sincerity by not remembering the man's name. In Act 3, Scene 3, we see Junius Brutus and Sicinius finally getting their way and inciting the people against Coriolanus. At this point, he is banished from the city and leaves in disgrace, but not before saying, "I banish you." It's a powerful scene that demonstrates just how quickly things can get out of control once people have been incited by instigators. And who could forget the monumental and long Act 5, Scene 3, in which Volumnia finally prevails over Coriolanus to join with the Volsces and create a peace between them and Rome. It just goes to show the power of the maternal instinct to soften even the hardest heart. There are no shortage of themes that run through Coriolanus. In this play, several characters demonstrate pride. First, in Act 1, Scene 3, we see true pride in Coriolanus' mother Volumnia as she speaks to her daughter-in-law. "If my son were my husband, I should freelier rejoice in that absence wherein he won honor, than in the embracements of his bed where he would show most love. When yet He was but tender-bodied, and the only son of my womb, when youth with comeliness plucked all gaze his way, when for a day of kings' entreaties a mother should not sell him an hour for her beholding, I, considering how honor would become such a person, that it was no better than picture-like to hang by the wall, if renown made it not stir, was pleased to let him seek danger where he was like to find fame. To a cruel war I sent him, from whence he returned, his brows bound with oak. I tell thee, daughter, I sprang not more in joy at first hearing he was a man-child, than now in first seeing he had proved himself a man. According to the Peter principle, sometimes a person who has excelled in one area is promoted as a reward and yet flounders in the new position because it requires new skills that they did not previously possess nor are likely to master. I've seen this frequently with successful salespeople who have been made into sales managers and great hockey players who've been promoted to coaching positions. Rarely do they ever prove as successful in their new roles as they did in their former ones. This is because they are not naturally suited to perform the latter positions. Coriolanus is such a person, who was an unparalleled warrior, but who completely lacked the tact and diplomacy, rapport skills, tolerance, and patience to succeed in a political environment. Now, we'll look at Act 2, Scene 1, which contains one of the most bizarre scenes in any Shakespeare play, in which Menenius and Volumnia revel when counting up how many wounds Coriolanus has now suffered on his body, because the more wounds he has, the more he will be praised for his victory. Listen to this. Menenius starts out. Is he not wounded? He was wont to come home wounded. Volumnia. He is wounded. I thank the gods for it. So do I too, if it be not too much. On his brow, Menenius, he comes the third time home with the oaken garland. This is a prize awarded to the top fighter in a battle. Where is he wounded? In the shoulder and in the left arm. There will be large cicatrices, these are scars, to show the people when he shall stand for his place. He received in the repulse of Tarquin 7 hurts in the body, 1 in the neck, 2 in the thigh. There's 9 that I know. He had before this last expedition 25 wounds upon him. Now it's 27. Every gash was an enemy's grave. This twisted praising is a different type of pride than Coriolanus has for himself, because when it comes to showing off his wounds, he's embarrassingly shy and modest. In my Leadership Academy, one of the topics I covered was mavericks. Coriolanus definitely falls into this category, but Shakespeare's other plays are also filled with mavericks. There's Hotspur in Henry IV, Part 1, Mark Antony in Antony and Cleopatra, Macbeth, Henry Bolingbroke in Richard II, and Richard Plantagenet, Duke of Gloucester, and the future Richard III in Henry VI, Part 3. So what do I mean by mavericks? They are those gifted and unique individuals who bring you the future. They can accomplish what other men merely dream about. They are willing to be part of the team provided they have the opportunity to show off what they can do individually. Eventually, they'll either want to lead the team, as Coriolanus did, or they'd rather just go solo, also as Coriolanus did. But here's what you should know about mavericks. They frequently act impulsively, and you'll have to give them a long leash in order for them to be effective. They may bring you a significant contribution, but they also exact a high price for it. They are respected by others, but very often are personally disliked. And even though others tolerate mavericks, eventually you'll have to fire a maverick when he or she no longer exhibits acceptable behavior, or when he or she stops producing a positive return on your investment. Keep in mind, I said fire, not run through with a sword. But there's also envy in this play, which we see primarily from Sicinius, Volutus, and Junius Brutus. Let's just say they don't give politicians a good name. They're appointed tribunals for the people, but all they really do is criticize Coriolanus for his accomplishments because they fear he will have more power than they will and outshine them, And it's their selfish motivations that nearly lead to the entire destruction of Rome. Had Coriolanus developed the skills of tact and diplomacy, they certainly would have served him well when he tried to transition from being a warrior to a member of the consul. Menenius, Cominius, and Volumina all had these skills and understood that they were as valuable in peace as soldiership is in war. Listen to this exchange between Coriolanus and his mother after he's been criticized by the people and the tribunal. In Act 3, Scene 2, Coriolanus asked his mother, "Why did you wish me milder? Would you have me false to myself? Rather say I play the man I am?" And his mother replies, "Oh, sir, 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 I would have had you put your power well on before you had worn it out. You are too absolute, though therein you can never be too noble, but when extremities speak. I have heard you say honor and policy, like unsevered friends, in the war do grow together. Grant that, and tell me in peace what each of them by the other lose that they combine not there. If it be honor in your wars to seem the same you are not, which for your best ends you adopt your policy, how is it less or worse that it shall hold companionship in peace with honor as in war, since that to both it stands in like request?" Coriolanus says, "Why force you this?" And she replies, "Because that now it lies you on to speak to the people, not by your own instruction, nor by the matter which your heart prompts you, but with such words that are but roded in your tongue. Now, this no more dishonors you at all than to take in a town with gentle words, which else would put you to your fortune and the hazard of much blood. I would dissemble with my nature, where my fortunes and my friends at stake required I should do so in honor. I am in this your wife, your son, these senators, the nobles, and you will rather show our general louts how you can frown than spend a fawn upon them for the inheritance of their loves and safeguard of what that want might ruin. I prithee now, my son, go to them with this bonnet in thy hand, and thus far having stretched it, here be with them, thy knee bussing the stones. For in such business action is eloquence, and the eyes of the ignorant more learned than the ears. Or say to them, thou art their soldier, and being bred in broils, hast not the soft way, which thou doth confess, were fit for thee to use, as they to claim in asking their good loves. But thou wilt frame thyself forsooth hereafter theirs, so far as thou hast power and person. And while it's true that Coriolanus was proud, he was also modest and humble whenever praise was spoken about him. Let's not forget that Coriolanus turned down 10% of all the spoils from Corioli because he said his sword would not permit him to take a bribe. This is him being humble. We also see how vulnerable he looks when he's asked to show his scars and wounds, which he received during his military service. In addition, we see gratitude and compassion when Coriolanus offers his throat to Tullus Aufidius and instead is welcomed into his home. Aufidius says, "O Marcius, Marcius, each word thou hast spoke hath weeded from my heart a root of ancient envy. If Jupiter should from yond cloud speak divine things and say 'tis true, I'd not believe them more than thee, all noble Marcius. Let me twine mine arms about that body, where against my grained ash, an 100 times hath broke and scarred the moon with splinters. Here I clip the anvil of my sword, and do contest as hotly as nobly with thy love, as ever in ambitious strength I did contend against thy valor. Know thou first, I love the maid I married. Never man sighed truer breath, but that I see thee here, thou noble thing, more dances my rapt heart than when I first my wedded mistress saw bestride my threshold. Thou hast beat me out 12 several times, and I have nightly since dreamt of encounters twixt thyself and me. We have been down together in my sleep, unbuckling helms, fisting each other's throats, and waked half dead with nothing. Worthy Marcius, had we no other quarrel else to Rome, but that thou art thence banished, we would muster all from 12 to 70, and pouring war into the bowels of ungrateful Rome, like a bold flood overbear it. Oh, come, go in, and take our friendly senators by the hands, who now are here, taking their leaves of me, who am prepared against your territories, though not for Rome itself. Therefore, most absolute sir, if thou wilt have the leading of thine own revenge, take the one half of my commission, and set down as best thou art experienced, since thou knowest thy country's strength and weakness, thine own ways, whether to knock against the gates of Rome, or rudely visit them in parts remote, to fright them ere destroy. But come in. Let me commend thee first to those that shall say yea to thy desires. 1,000 welcomes, and more a friend than e'er an enemy. Yet, Marcius, that was much. It's obvious from this exchange how much Aufidius admires Coriolanus. Ironically, he demonstrates more respect and appreciation for his accomplishments as an enemy than did the plebeians of Rome on whose behalf he was fighting. Of course, the greatest act of compassion is from Coriolanus himself, when after long and intense pleading from his mother, he gives in and agrees to create a peace between Rome and the Volsces, even though it leads to his ultimate demise. Oh well, I guess that's gratitude for you. As we look over some of Shakespeare's most powerful lines in this play, you have to ask yourself the question, so why are the common people so up in arms? Well, Menenius asks them in Act 1, Scene 1, and here's their reply. Care for us? True indeed, they ne'er cared for us yet. Suffer us to famish, and their storehouses crammed with grain? Make edicts for usury to support usurers? Repeal daily any wholesome act established against the rich? And provide more piercing statutes daily to chain up and restrain the poor? If the wars eat us not up, they will, and there's all the love they bear us. You could probably look at any country in the world today and find people who hold similar views about their political leaders. Now, one of the reasons why Coriolanus is such a pertinent play is because, as Shakespeare's most political work, it translates perfectly as a contemporary piece, relatable to its audience regardless of whatever era in which it's performed. In Act 1, Scene 1, Menenius responds to the citizen, saying, I shall tell you a pretty tale. It may be you have heard it, but since it serves my purpose, I will venture to stale it a little more. There was a time when all the body's members rebelled against the belly. Thus accused it, that only like a gulf it did remain in the midst of the body, idle and unactive, still covering the viand, never bearing like labor with the rest, where the other instruments did see and hear, devise, instruct, walk, feel, and mutually participate, did minister unto the appetite and affection common of the whole body. The belly answered with a kind of smile, which never came from the lungs, but even thus, for look you, I may make the belly smile as well as speak. It tauntingly replied to the discontented members, the mutinous parts that envied his receipt, even so most fitly as you malign our senators, for that they are not such as you. Note me this, good friend. Your most grave belly was deliberate, not rash like his accusers, and thus answered, True it is, my incorporate friends, quoth he, that I receive the general food at first, which you do live upon, and fit it is because I am the storehouse and the shop of the whole body. But if you do remember, I send it through the rivers of your blood, even to the court, the heart, to the seat of the brain, and through the cranks and offices of man. The strongest nerves and small inferior veins from me receive that natural competency whereby they live. And though that all at once, you, my good friends, this says the belly, mark me, though all at once cannot see what I do deliver out to each, yet I can make my audit up, that all from me do back receive the flower of all, and leave me but the bran. What say you to it? And the citizens say, it was an answer. How apply you this? And Aeneas says, the senators of Rome are this good belly, and you the mutinous members. For examine their counsels and their cares, digest things rightly, touching the weal of the common, you shall find no public benefit which you receive, but it proceeds or comes from them to you, and no way from yourselves. As I said, the people resent the elected officials, and the leaders feel unappreciated and scorned by the very people they served. So what else is new? And I've got some other powerful lines that are a little shorter to share with you. In Act 1, Scene 6, Coriolanus says to his troops, make you a sword of me. And it has the same effect on them as Henry V's Band of Brothers speech had on his troops just before the Battle of Agincourt. In Act 2, Scene 1, Sicinius says, nature teaches beasts know their friends. In this case, the conniving weasels Sicinius and Junius Brutus turn out to be no better than rats and snakes. In Act 3, Scene 3, Coriolanus says, you common cry of curs, whose breath I hate, as reek o'er the rotten fens, whose loves I prize as the dead carcasses of unburied men that do corrupt my air, I banish you. There is a world elsewhere. This is known as reframing. That's when you take a negative situation and you turn it into a positive one. It's also the same kind of message that John of Gaunt gives Henry Bolingbroke after he's banished from England in Richard II. In Act 4, Scene 1, Coriolanus says to his mother, I shall be loved when I am lacked. This is very similar to what St. Luke says in chapter 4, verse 24. No prophet is accepted in his own country. And in Act 4, Scene 3, we hear the Roman spy Nicanor say, I have heard it said the fittest time to corrupt a man's wife is when she has fallen out with her husband. How true is that? And finally, in Act 5, Scene 4, Menenius says, our throats are sentenced and stay upon execution. And Sicinius, not believing him, says, is it possible that so short a time can alter the condition of a man? Menenius replies, there's a difference between a grub and a butterfly, yet your butterfly was a grub. This Martius has grown from man to dragon. He has wings. He's more than a creeping thing. When we return, we'll look at some of the major turning points and correlations between Coriolanus and the other Shakespeare plays. One of the biggest turning points in Coriolanus is when he is banished from Rome and decides to seek out Tullus Aufidius, his sworn enemy, and offer him his life or to join forces with him against Rome. In one of his few soliloquies, we hear his plans as he enters Antium and prepares to seek out his nemesis. A goodly city, this Antium, city, 'tis I that made thy widows. Many an heir of these fair edifices, for my wars, have I heard groan and drop. Then know me not, lest that thy wives with spits and boys with stones in puny battles slay me. O world, thy slippery turns, friends, now fast sworn, whose double bosoms seem to wear one heart, whose hours, whose bed, whose meal, and exercise are still together, who twin, as 'twere in love inseparable, shall within this hour on a dissension of a doit break out to bitterest enmity. So fellest foes, whose passions and whose plots have broke their sleep, to take the one the other, by some chance, some trick not worth an egg, shall grow dear friends and interjoin their issues. So with me, my birthplace hate I, and my love's upon this enemy town. I'll enter. If he slay me, he does fair justice. If he give me way, I'll do his country service. Of course, the other major turning point in this play is his mother Volumina demonstrating how she earned her name when pleading on her hands and knees alongside Coriolanus's wife and son for mercy towards Rome and to create a peace and reconciliation with the Volscians. You have to give her credit because her persistence paid off and she made her son's heart melt. There's also some other correlations in Coriolanus to some of the other Shakespeare plays. Near the end of Coriolanus, he refers to Aufidius as boy, just like Mark Antony did to Octavius Caesar in Antony and Cleopatra. When Coriolanus turns down 1/10 of the spoils collected in Corioli, it's reminiscent of Julius Caesar pushing away the crown 3 times when it's offered to him by Mark Antony in Julius Caesar. Of course, Richard of Gloucester also turns down the monarchy in Richard III before finally accepting it, but there we know because he tells the audience that he planned on taking the crown all along. When Coriolanus changes sides and plans on attacking Rome with the Volscian army, his proud mother is torn between cheering on her valiant son and trying to save her life and the lives of her family and friends. This is not unlike Lady Blanche's plight in The Life and Death of King John, when her newly wedded husband, Louis the Dauphin of France, goes to war against England and Blanche's uncle, King John. As she says, no matter who wins, she loses. And when it comes to banishment, you see it happen not only to Coriolanus, to Alcibiades in Timon of Athens, to Romeo in Romeo and Juliet, and to Henry Bolingbroke in Richard II, but also to Duke Senior and Rosalind in As You Like It. Shakespeare knew a good plot device when he saw one, and let's face it, when something works, you stick with it. In doing the research for this episode, I came across some interesting facts about Coriolanus. According to the late English professor Paul Cantor of University of Virginia, although caps and bonnets are mentioned several times throughout the play, Roman citizens did not wear either of them in the 5th century BC. Coriolanus actually translates as victorious in Corioli. And by the way, the real Coriolanus had 2 sons, not one, and his mother's name was Vituria, not Volumina. Along with Antony and Cleopatra, Coriolanus marks the last of Shakespeare's Roman plays. Probably one of the main reasons why the play is not more popular is because it contains very few soliloquies and thus doesn't allow us to truly understand the depth of this character. Still, in The Sacred Wood, T.S. Eliot proclaimed Coriolanus superior to Hamlet, calling it, along with Antony and Cleopatra, the bard's greatest achievement. Coriolanus was also banned briefly in France in the late 1930s because of its use by the fascist element. And Sir Laurence Olivier played the lead in Coriolanus at the Old Vic in 1937 and again in 1959. In the death scene, he dropped backwards from a high platform suspended upside down without the aid of wires. That certainly must have been something to see. And before we finish up this section, I have some questions I want you to ponder. First, when Cominius and Menenius go to Coriolanus and beg for mercy, he sends them away unmoved, yet he freely expresses his love for them to Tullus Aufidius. Why then does he not just invite the 2 of them to stay with him to avoid being slaughtered or give some instructions for them to be spared? Second, when Coriolanus' mother, wife, son, and family friend Valeria petitioned him for mercy, why didn't he just have them stay with him so that they would not be killed when the Volscis attacked Rome? Or when Coriolanus was banished, why didn't he bring his family with him when he left or send for them after he had been befriended by Tullus Aufidius? And finally, why didn't Coriolanus discuss the Volscian-Roman reconciliation one-on-one with Aufidius in private before declaring that he would do it on his own? Aufidius had already said that he was moved by the women's petitions. There's a good chance that he would have gone along with it especially if he would have gotten credit for creating the piece? Well, we don't know the answers because Shakespeare doesn't tell us, and besides, it is a history play. Perhaps the answers are just lost to time, but these solutions would have made more sense than having Coriolanus dismiss his loved ones and then eventually unilaterally agree to broker a peace, thus disrespecting his adopted host. Questions like these are what makes us love Shakespeare and discuss his works 400 years after he wrote them. When we return, we'll look at some of the great actors in the 1984 BBC Shakespeare version of Coriolanus. All right, now let's take a look at some of the actors in the 1984 BBC Shakespeare version of Coriolanus. Patrick Godfrey, who plays Cominius, also played Helicanus in Pericles, Prince of Tyre, also in 1984, and several characters, including Mr. Kenwigs in The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby in 1982. John Rowe, who plays the first Roman senator, also played Cromwell in Henry VIII in 1979 and Lennox in Macbeth in 1983. Peter Sams, who plays Titus Lartius, also played a bachelor in All's Well That Ends Well in 1981. John Burgess, who plays Sicinius Volutus, also played Sir Nathaniel in Love's Labour's Lost in 1985. The great actor Anthony Pedley, who plays Junius Brutus, also played Tranio in The Taming of the Shrew in 1980. And in 1981, he played Agrippa in Antony and Cleopatra, Rodrigo in Othello, and Ajax in Troilus and Cressida. The magnificent Mike Gwilym, who plays Tullus Aufidius, also played Pericles in Pericles, Prince of Tyre in 1984, and Barone in Love's Labour's Lost in 1985. Valentine Dial, who plays Adrian, also played Marcaday in Love's Labour's Lost in 1985. Brian Poyser, who plays the first Volscian senator, also plays Gower in Henry IV Part 2 and Henry V, both in 1979. Reginald Jessup, who plays the second Volscian senator, also played a poet in Julius Caesar in 1979 and a messenger in Hamlet in 1980. Joan McCallum, who plays Virgilia, also played Countess d'Auvergne in Henry VI Part 1. And finally, Paul Jesson, who plays the first citizen in Coriolanus, also played Clown in The Winter's Tale in 1981, Cloten in Cymbeline in 1982, multiple roles including the Duke of Clarence in Henry VI Parts 1, 2, and 3, and Richard III, all in 1983, and Costard in Love's Labour's Lost in 1985. That means he has appeared in 8 different BBC Shakespeare plays, by my count, more than any other actor in the entire series. Now stay tuned for today's trivia challenge, which is called Into the Woods. All right, now it's time for today's trivia challenge, which is called Into the Woods. Name the play in which these woodland settings are included. Number 1, Great Burnham Wood. Number 2, The Forest of Arden. And number 3, Windsor Forest. Don't overthink it. When we return, I'll have the answers for you, as well as some relevant lessons from Coriolanus. All right, let's see how you did on today's trivia challenge. It was called Into the Woods, and you were to name the play in which these woodland settings are included. Number 1, Great Burnham Wood. That was, of course, from Macbeth. Number 2, The Forest of Arden. That was from As You Like It. And number 3, Windsor Forest. I hope you got this one right. It's The Merry Wives of Windsor. Now let's finish up with some relevant lessons from Coriolanus. First, learn how to win friends and influence people. One of Coriolanus's biggest faults was that he was both proud and humble, but not usually at the right times. That's why it's so important to keep developing your people skills. Second, know your limitations. I don't know the formula for success, but I do know that the surest formula for failure is to try to please everyone. You can't be all things to all people, and the sooner you learn what your gifts are and master them, the more successful you'll be. But I also urge you to become well rounded so that you can adapt yourself more comfortably in different situations. And finally, remember they'll never care how much you know until they know how much you care. Coriolanus wanted to befriend the poor Volsky who helped him, but couldn't even be bothered to remember his name. So take the time to make other people feel important and special, and always remember that while it's nice to be important, it's also important to be nice. I'm Dave Romeo, and thank you for watching this episode of Romeo on Shakespeare. Please join me next time when a Phoenician prince must solve a riddle on a foreign shore to win a princess, but winds up with more than he bargained for.